we need to ask ourselves which are the new sectors that we need to look at. The capacity of the state also needs to be strengthened. We need to hasten the strengthening of the capacity of the state. We now need to look to the various subsectors of our economy, but we also need to look at great opportunities that lie ahead.
A point of order, Speaker.
What's the point of order?
One of those is...
Mr. President, a moment. What's the point of order?
Speaker, just yesterday, there was a agreed, position that every speaker must have the approved background of Parliament. And the President seems not to be following in that agreement. I think that it's in order that the President leads by example, puts a background approved by Parliament. Each and every member is in the point of order background. And there's no excuse the President of the country to be using a background that is obviously political and does not really speak to Parliament. He must not, even though he's at home, he must at least resemble Parliament, as all of us have done. So please, may the President follow the rules as all of us are doing. Thank you.
The President is following the rules. He is not a member of Parliament. That rule doesn't apply to him. Honorable members, Honorable President, please proceed.
Hello.
Point of order.
Hello, Reverend.
On a point of order, Speaker.
Out of order.
I hope the point is not about the same matter. Yes, let's hear. What are you rising on?
Order. Your ruling is out of order.
Okay.
President, when he's in Parliament, the rules of Parliament applies to him. Don't come with that kitchen approach of favoring other people and not favoring other people.
Let me explain.
You know very
Honorable
well that
Malema,
even if he's not a member of Parliament,
Honorable Malema,
the rules of Parliament apply to him when he's in Parliament.
Honorable Malema.
As you are encouraging all of us to do, ask him to put a Parliament background.
Honorable Malema, listen to me. You've made your point, and I've ruled on this matter. If you contest the ruling, please do what the rules say you must do. You can't contest it during the session. You must write to the Speaker and lay your complaint there. Please. We are proceeding. Mr. President, please proceed.
On a point of order, Deputy Speaker.
If it's, I hope it's not the same point. If it is, you are out of order in advance. I'm not taking any view on this matter. And I'm advised by the rules to do that.
Yesterday, it is you yesterday who said that
this matter
people must not use
can you
any
switch
other
off this
background.
mic, please?
And you know very well that the rules of the National
not using a background, Shivambo. You're not also using the background.
Honorable members, please. The President will proceed.
You allow the President to come.
You are not supposed to be talking, Honorable Malema. You are breaking the rules. Nobody recognized you.
A president must display a fireplace.
Honorable member, Honorable Malema, you are breaking the rules of the House. Stop talking, please. Stop talking. And honorable members, we have ruled on these matters. Members are not supposed to contest rulings of the House in the House.
We are going to put him in Baula, and there is nothing you can do.
Honorable member, okay, you think there's nothing I can do? You watch the space. You watch the space, Honorable Malema, and you have a responsibility to act.
How do you preside with threats?
No, Honorable member, it's not a threat. It's the requirements of the rules.
Today you must test your own medicine.
Honorable members,
tell Ramaphosa to put the background.
Switch off switch off the mics, please. Switch off the mics. Please switch off the mics.
Whose mics are switching off now?
Honorable members, I'm not taking any point of order anymore.
Well, whose mics are switching?
Honorable members, can you switch off those mics? I have,
which mics?
You switch off. There is no point of order I'm going to accept now, because the matters you are raising are about matters that I've ruled upon, and you can't be contesting those in the House. Even on the assumption that I'm wrong, take it to the Speaker in writing as the rules advise you. You can't stop the proceedings of the House on the basis that your way is all our way. It can't be.
It must be consistent.
Honorable President, please proceed.
One of the opportunities that this moment heralds is that we've got to focus on areas that we've often spoken about but have not really followed through. Like, for instance, strengthening our industrial base through the reindustrialization process, making sure that there is localization, that we manufacture goods in our country, and ensure that the manufacturing base is once more strengthened. We've seen how, for instance, as we've been scouring around the world trying to get masks and PPEs, that this can give us a great opportunity to have our own masks made here, our own PPEs made here. But this is an opportunity that many who are in the manufacturing base are beginning to take up. So this post-COVID moment, we should utilize to make more South African goods, make sure that we localize, make sure we strengthen our industrial base. And through all this, we will then be able to focus on a number of areas that are going to support the livelihoods of our people, provide better services, and the opportunities post-COVID are quite plentiful. And so therefore, that is why I say there is in the end a silver lining below this cloud, and our third phase, which was going to deal with the economic recovery going forward, must make sure that we build an inclusive economy, an economy that is going to create jobs, an economy that is going to ensure that young people are brought in, they use their capability, their knowledge, and we push the agenda of the fourth industrial revolution, that women in our country get great opportunities and are supported. And we bring in the private sector to invest more and more in the economy as we strengthen our state-owned enterprises as well. So going forward, we see great opportunities, and we believe that this is a moment when we need to move our economy forward. We will go through a slump because COVID-19 still has to have its effect, and we need to see how that effect is going to work out, but we are going to go on with the rebuilding process as we move forward. Thank you, Honorable Deputy Speaker.
Thank you, Mr. President. Honorable Hlengwa, it's your turn. Honorable members, you are screaming as if the House is not proceeding. Can you please take it easy?
Well, thank you very much, Honorable Deputy Speaker. Mr. President, obviously the situation before us is very dire if you consider the fact that some research gives projections that Africa will lose about 20 million jobs because of this virus. But also on the flip side of it, Mr. President, you speak about millions and billions of rands which will be injected to the many programs to reset and restart the economy. Be ignorant to the fact that chief amongst the biggest threats to the money that will be made available is corruption. You look at the Bridge border post, for example, 37 million rands for 40 kilometers. You look at how the social development grants and food parcels have been abused now. The question then, Mr. President, becomes, what is it that, or what conversations and decisions are you taking at an executive level, whilst Parliament will be, of course, having its own processes, to actually deal with this scourge of corruption, which is, of course, taking advantage of the crisis that we are in, particularly given the loopholes.
Thank you, Honorable Hlengwa. You have overstepped your time. Sorry, your time is
on this very difficult matter.
Honorable Hlengwa, please, in future, try and time yourself better. Put your questions up front so that when I cut you as I will, when you go over time, you've asked your question.
Noted, Deputy Speaker. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Honorable President.
Honorable Deputy Speaker and honorable members, of course, corruption is and remains a major challenge to our country. We need to be dealing with corruption effectively. And even as we announce this 500 billion economic relief and social relief, I took time to speak to the Auditor General and said, Auditor General, we need to put in place proactive mechanisms so that we do not come after the effect. We need to put in place mechanisms that are going to raise the alarm at an early stage. And the Auditor General had already taken it upon himself to get his office to come up with a number of protocols, a number of rules, which I think he is working through, because we do need to ensure that before those who have a corrupt intention are stopped in their tracks, before they loot money that is meant for the poor people in our country. Of course, we've also been disturbed by news and reports that things such as food parcels have been redirected in ways that did not look as good as what we had intended. And as they have happened, we're glad that the media raised the alarm. We're glad that various structures, including political parties in Parliament here, did raise the alarm. And I'm sure that that has now quietened down quite a bit. But Honorable Hlengwa, we are concerned as you are, and we want to ensure that the money that has been set aside for the COVID relief at a social level and at an economic level is properly used, and it is used for what it is intended for. And quite a bit of that money obviously is going to be utilized for social grants, which Department of Social Development is dealing with. I was pleased when I heard their report about the distribution of the 350 Rand to a number of people who were not in their system, and that is proceeding, and well more than 1 million has already been distributed, and this week alone they are going to be distributing a further 1 million, and that process that they've set in place is such that the money should end up going to those people that it was intended for. The money that should go as additional grants to the beneficiaries of our grant system will end up going there. The money that will be set aside to assist small and medium enterprises will end up going there. So in the main, the bulk of the money is going to be channeled through the various platforms that we have, and what we need to be alert about is the other money that will be distributed in ways that will need to ensure that it does end up going to those beneficiaries. So we're going to ensure that the 500 billion Rand is distributed in a way where we minimize corruption as much as possible. We will keep a hawk's eye on how all that is going to happen, and we're glad to know that an institution like the Auditor General will also be joining in the act on a proactive basis rather than on a reactive basis. So we will try the best we can, and obviously with the assistance of the various structures in Parliament, we hope that we will minimize corruption as much as possible. Thank you, Deputy Speaker.
Thank you, Mr. President. Honorable, the Leader of Opposition.
Thank you, Deputy Speaker. Everyone agrees, including your Finance Minister, Mr. President, that the only sustainable option for the way forward in our economy is through structural reform if we're going to unlock economic growth. In fact, Mr. President, structural reform was the basis on which you campaigned for the presidency of your party and for the country, and yet we stand here in Parliament today, 3 years later, and you've got nothing to show for it. Yesterday we heard we're going to have to spend 33 billion rand bailing out South African Airways to save 1,000 jobs. Mr. President, the question to you is this: will you today make the brave stand and stand with the 3 million South Africans who are going to lose their jobs and oppose the 33 billion rand bailout, or are you going to see that money being poured into the abyss of state-owned entity like South African Airways, where it could have been used to save the lives and livelihoods of millions of more South Africans?
Mr. President.
Thank you very much, Deputy Speaker. We are going to do everything we can to ensure that we reposition our economy and our country on a reform process which is going to ensure that our economy functions a lot better. And one of the things that we have said is that we are going to also pay closer attention to our state-owned enterprises and ensure that our state-owned enterprises function in the way that they should, efficiently, and those state-owned enterprises that need attention should be given the attention from either a financial point of view. We should see how best those finances can be repositioned, or an operational point of view. We've set up the State-Owned Enterprises Council, which is going to be advising government and cabinet, on which cabinet ministers also will be sitting. And we're going to have a closer look at all our state-owned enterprises. And we will do so to advance the interests of all South Africans. State-owned enterprises will continue to play an important role in our economy. And this is also the case now post-COVID in other economies as well. The other day I saw that the German government had taken an equity position in Lufthansa because their airline has, during the COVID period, hit a number of financial difficulties, and the state has moved in to support that airline. And indeed, this is what is happening in many countries around the world, where enterprises, be they state-owned or privately owned, are now needing support to be able to move forward. Now, you talk about South African Airways, the business rescue practitioners are coming forward with a plan, which we are going to discuss. We're going to discuss precisely what they are proposing. I appointed an interministerial committee, which has been dealing with what the business rescue practitioners have put forward, and we are going to interrogate precisely what they are proposing. The state is already exposed, if you care to know, to the South African Airways saga, if you like, because the state over time, and this did not happen last year or year before last, over time the state acts as the guarantor of the financial fortunes of many of our state-owned enterprises. So the state is already exposed to the tune of 16 billion. And the business rescue practitioners are coming forward with a plan which we will look at very closely, and we will look at the pros and the cons of precisely what they are proposing and the time frame. And we will also look at whether South African Airways can be restructured in any way, shape, or form and whether in doing so we can look more broadly at our aviation industry. The post-COVID-19 situation gives us a number of opportunities that we now need to look at. And I'd like to invite you as well to look at the post-19 situation through different lenses, a different lens that will say, what do we do to restructure the economy of our country? What do we do also to reposition state-owned enterprises? And if you have any ideas, please bring them to the table, because it is at this time that we are looking at various propositions as we move forward. Thank you very much, Deputy Speaker.
Thank you very much, Mr. President. We now move to the next question 2, asked by the leader of the opposition.
On a point of order, sorry? On a point of order, Speaker.
Oh, yeah. Speaker. Oh, my apologies. Oh, my apologies, Honorable Shivambo, it's your turn. Go ahead.
It was not a mistake, it was deliberate. The question you are responding to,
now,
President.
Honorable Shivambo, if it's deliberate, then you don't proceed, you don't talk. That's the rule. You will not talk. You are not the president of the country, man. With the government logo. No, you won't speak.
Stop behaving like you are drunk.
No, you won't speak.
Stop behaving like you are drunk.
No, you won't. No, Honorable Shivambo.
You are this subject.
These rules were approved upon. We are noting what you are saying, and we are going to check these remarks you are making. And you are not going to speak if you don't change that thing deliberately. You tell in the House you deliberately breaking the rule. There's no way you will be allowed to speak. No way. No, you have to throw me out of the House. No. Honorable members, we made a ruling on this matter yesterday. It will not be changed by the methods you are using. No.
You are out of order, Chief.
No, I'm not out of order. I'm enforcing the rules that you are part of
order. Letitia is out of order. He always does. Who is Letitia? He thinks he's a clown. You are a clown.
I must... no, we are listening to you. And this is a recorded session of Parliament, and we will act against it. We will not allow anybody to speak here.
Neither are we at your mercy either.
Not your house.
No.
Disrespectful. Stop being disrespectful.
Yes.
Yes, you.
Disrespectful is
honorable members.
We are
it
here
is wrong.
We're not here in your favor.
It is wrong for you to do what you are doing. You are not going to be allowed to do it.
Some emotional.
Can I proceed with the question?
Yes, on condition you know what you must do. You know the conditions.
What should I do? What should I do? You're on the
you switch you switch off. You put it on. You had it on. You put it on. The background. You do it.
But Deputy Speaker,
all your people were speaking with a different background. They were never ordered to do so. Why are you?
But who is this person who screams like one traveling?
With a different background, you didn't.
You keep quiet. You let
Stop
me
your nonsense.
You keep quiet, honorable members.
Go and sleep.
Honorable Shivambo, proceed.
Yeah, that's
we'll come back to that.
Thank you very much, President.
I'm advised.
The question is in two parts. The question that you are responding to is in two parts. One is in relation to the sovereign economy, and two is in relation to the free trade agreement, the African Free Trade Agreement. And predictably, your response, you say you're going to call another symposium. That is what you did when you had the coup d'etat on Jacob Zuma in 2018. You did symposiums, got lots of commitments on growth and investments. Your friends, the white capitalist establishment, committed to grow the sovereign economy. But since you are in office, South Africa's economy has grown by less than 0.2%, which is the worst since the global economic crisis.
and there seemed to be nothing. You are saying now that post-COVID we're going to start localizing. And that is a commitment you made when you first locked down South Africa. Why not now? The last question that we want to deal with is that, noting the fact that the economy in the entire African continent is owned and controlled by the colonial descendants,
Honorable Member,
the descendants of colonial settlers. And isn't this free trade agreement going to be a free trade of colonialists and now the Chinese without any African ownership of the economy?
Your time has expired. Your time has expired. Your time has expired. Honorable President.
Been saying that we need to localize. But the post-COVID situation is going to add impetus to precisely that. We have been able to see how we can get, firstly, our industrialists, our own industrialists, to live up to coming into the economy, becoming real industrialists, becoming manufacturers. I have seen, Honorable Chibambu, for myself, how a number of black industrialists are taking various opportunities that COVID-19 is presenting to them. They are making some of the goods that are now needed right here in our own country. They are making the masks, they are making the PPEs, and they now are going to be moving forward to even making the test kits. And many of them are black industrialists. And we need to welcome this. And over time, they will start having economies of scale as to be able also to export. Later today, we are going to be launching a platform for the African continent, where we are going to be able to get all countries on the African continent to buy diagnostic and therapeutic medical supplies. Admittedly, quite a number of them come from other countries, but interestingly, a number of those supplies are going to be supplied by African manufacturers, right from Egypt, right through down to the south. And they are going to be part of this platform. They are going to be selling to the entire continent various supplies. And this is what COVID-19 is presenting to the continent as a silver lining. A number of African 100% owned African entities on the African continent are coming to the fore. They're going to be part of the Africa Free Trade Area Agreement, and they are now going to also participate in this platform for medical supplies that we are going to set up. So we are seeing the positive side. And what we are also saying is that we need to be encouraging, supporting, and the state needs to be assisting and giving incentives and giving support, both financial and otherwise, to these, in our own country, black industrialists, as many as possible, to help grow the economy of our country. And yes, the economic growth of our country has been tapering down for some time. And what we have been doing is to do everything we can to reposition our economy so that we can begin to accede to higher levels of growth. But post-COVID-19 is going to give us even a greater opportunity to be able to do so. So I am optimistic. I am not pessimistic like some people are. I am very optimistic. And I think that we do have an opportunity, and these are opportunities that we must yield. And if there ever was a time for us to be able to bring in more and more black people into the industrial base, the manufacturing base. This is the time that we need to utilize. And that is why we are saying the restructuring of our economy is a moment that we now need to grasp. Thank you very much, Deputy Speaker.
Thank you, Mr. President. The second question
Deputy Speaker, may I raise a point of order?
What's the point of order?
Deputy Speaker, Honorable Shivambo said that the President led a coup d'etat against former President Jacob Zuma. That is correct. There was no coup d'etat. And I request that in terms of our rules, you should withdraw the statement.
Honorable members, we'll look at it and we'll come back on that matter. We'll make a ruling.
And I was not going to withdraw.
Honorable Leader of the Opposition asked the next question. Mr. President, the second question here.
Honorable Deputy Speaker and honorable members, in determining the appropriate response to the global coronavirus pandemic, government has formed by the advice of scientists, by the experiences of other countries, and from the guidance of the World Health Organization, as well as the Africa Center for Disease Control and Prevention. The decision to institute a nationwide lockdown was informed, amongst other things, by epidemiological analyses based on the available evidence of the rate at which the number of coronavirus cases was increasing. This provided modeled estimates of over 1 million infections at peak. Recently, the country's COVID-19 modeling consortium has generated optimistic as well as pessimistic estimates of between 3.4 to 3.7 million cases of infections by the 1st of November this year. The initial estimates pointed to the need to act quickly and decisively before the epidemic curve reached what scientists call the inflection point. Now, the inflection point is when the curve changes from a slow and a steady increase in cases to one with an exponential growth, almost an explosive growth. South Africa had an opportunity to act early before its inflection point had been reached. We made the decision to implement a lockdown when there were 274 confirmed cases in the country. At that point, scientists estimated that South Africa already had over 1,000 cases, many of which had not been identified yet due to limited screening and stringent testing criteria. By the time I announced the lockdown on the Monday, the 23rd of March, the number of confirmed cases had risen to 402. And by the time the lockdown took effect, if we all recall, on Friday, the 27th of March, there were already 1,170 cases. In other words, we have seen an explosion. A prolonged delay in implementing stringent measures would have meant that South Africa would have missed the window of opportunity to achieve a significant flattening of the curve. This could have led to a runaway epidemic with potentially catastrophic consequences for our healthcare services. And in this case, it's important that the graph that Professor Karim has shown and Minister Mkhize has shown repeatedly should remain affixed in our minds, where we were proceeding on the same trajectory as the UK. And when we did the lockdown, we immediately saw us deviating from the path that the UK was moving forward on. The UK kept on moving up when our cases of infection started moving more flatter. And they kept moving up with their own infections going higher and higher, and many deaths accompanying that. Now, in the 3 weeks before the nationwide lockdown, the number of the cases in our country was doubling every 2 days. During the course of level 5 lockdown, cases were on average doubling only every 15 days, and meaning that the lockdown was taking the effect that we intended. Since we began easing of the lockdown during alert levels 4 and 3, the doubling time has now been around 12 days. In other words, the lockdown enabled the country to start to flatten the curve, delaying community transmission, something we were most concerned about when we were not ready for long enough to prepare our health facilities and implement public health responses. Now, if you remember that graph of the UK and ourselves, when they implemented what appeared to be a lockdown, they were already at the height of a number of deaths and many more infections. And in our case, we had succeeded through the lockdown to flatten, and the doubling effect had come back down from 2 days to 15 days, and now it has come down to 12 days. I thank you.
Thank you. Honorable, the Leader of the Opposition.
Thank you, Deputy Speaker. Mr. President, at the beginning of the pandemic, you asked South Africans to make sacrifices. And South Africans have complied, and this has come at a huge cost. Many have lost their jobs and their businesses that they've spent years building up. However, Mr. President, you and your government have not played your part in the pandemic by being transparent with how you have made these decisions and the data and modeling that informs them. You've withheld all but the very top-level COVID data from the citizens of this country, including the model which you say you have relied upon to implement the lockdown, the initial lockdown, but then to extend the hardest, longest, and most brutal lockdown in the world during this period. Mr. President, why do you believe that citizens who've sacrificed so much do not have the right to this information?
Mr. President.
What brutal.
Thank you. Thank you, Honorable Deputy Speaker. The information that I've just disclosed now is information that we did in time disclose. One of those was one of the most horrific, where they said we are possibly going to see up to 40,000 people dead. And discussing it within our own ranks, we said there's just no reason why any information, modeling or otherwise, should not be disclosed to South Africans. There's no reason why we should be acting in the dark. Every piece of information about this should be disclosed. And I'm very pleased that the Medical Advisory Committee that Dr. Mkhize set up to advise government has been able to come up with a number of advisories. And of course, we've also seen how a number of the members, 51-member Medical Advisory Committee, have had diverse views. And we have not shied away from saying, yes, even if they have diverse views, those diverse views must be heard. There may well have been a blip along the way, but we've said if they have diverse views, and if anyone, scientist or otherwise in our country, has diverse views and modelers, and we've had chartered accountants doing quite a lot of modeling, actuaries doing quite a lot of modeling. The consortium of modelers has come up with a lot of modeling. So the modeling, truth be told, has come up with such variant type of models. And some of the models have been completely off of the beam. And some of them have beaten a middle path. And I must say that we have not been short of information that should be made available. And I'm one of those, Honorable Stephen Hazen, who would say whatever information there is, yes, needs to be put out there in the public. And South Africans are very discerning. Apart from having made huge sacrifices, as you correctly say, they're very discerning. They've been able to make judgments. And as the government has led this process, it has led this process honestly, with integrity, without seeking to hide anything to the people of South Africa. And I have said myself that as there is no textbook on how we should traverse our way around managing this virus, there have been moments where, yes, we've had some missteps, but in the main, the government of the Republic of South Africa has been straightforward, honest with the people of South Africa, led them with integrity, and disclosed information. Our ministers have been briefing the public on an ongoing basis. And with that has come a lot of information that has been displayed to our people. Minister of Health continues to brief the people of South Africa about the progression of the pandemic. The National Coronavirus Command Council meets regularly, and through that we are able to get the advice not only of the net joints, which is on an hourly basis seized with the task of managing the virus process, but also the medical advisory committee. So the various institutions in our country, from the NICD and many others, have been seized with seeking to put forward information to the public of South Africa without hiding the information. Thank you very much, Deputy Speaker.
Thank you. Honorable Sheikh Imam.
Thank you, Honorable Deputy Speaker. Mr. President, on scientific risk assessment, it is your command council that allowed the opening of schools, which is now a disaster, with hundreds of schools not having water and PPEs. It is your command council that have allowed alcohol, despite all the evidence on contrary to the benefits of alcohol, but what a challenge is it in society. It is your command council that took a decision on tobacco, saying that tobacco was harmful, but now made an about turn in court. It is your command council that has said it is safe to travel by air, despite the evidence to the contrary that it is not safe to travel by air in a full flight. Now, what scientific evidence did your command council rely on to take such decisions? And very importantly, Mr. President, you repeatedly talk about strict protocols. Hundreds of regulations were made. What measures has your command council put in place to ensure there's a high level of compliance to ensure that we limit transmission? Thank you, Mr. President.
Mr. President.
Thank you very much. As I said right at the beginning, various processes and interventions that we've embarked upon as government have been interventions in the main that have been advised and thoroughly discussed by our experts and our scientists. And obviously, we have also had to do the risk assessment as the political leaders of the country, as we've implemented this. For instance, when it comes to opening schools, we did say that we would not want to see us losing the year of schooling. What is it that we can do? The Medical Advisory Council advice was, so long as we can make sure that there is social distancing, and so long as we can ensure that we utilize all the tools in the toolbox, the masks, the hand washing, sanitizers, and the young people are properly distanced in the class. They said, yes, that can be an option to go for. We then decided to do what I would call light touch. We said, we're not going to open up all the classes. We're going to open up the two, if you like, finishing classes, grade 7 as well as grade 12. And that is what we decided on. And it was risk-adjusted based. Yes, admittedly, as Honorable Imam says, many schools have not had the protective equipment, and that is being looked at and that is being worked on. Minister of Basic Education is continuously monitoring the availability of all those at all the schools in our country. And we have said, even as I announced it, I said, where this is not in existence, and if parents do not feel satisfied, the schools should not open. And that has by and large been adhered to. Yes, of course, there have been infections where young people have been infected and brought infections in the schools, and that has been immediately identified and measures have been taken. And the view we've taken is that this virus is going to be with us for a long time, possibly for years. And we therefore need to live with the virus, manage it, and ensure that we adjust the risk. And as we do so, ensure that our people are safe, but as we move on, particularly on the economic side, that we save livelihoods as well. The issue of alcohol was discussed quite thoroughly by the various structures, including the National Coronavirus Command Council. And it was felt that if we can put in place the various measures of ensuring that even as we open alcohol, at this point in time, we should try and restrict as much as we can. Now, of course, as we opened it, a number of our people in South Africa started going way overboard. And as I was saying yesterday, it has led to abuse as well. And this is the debate that we should have as a nation. South Africa is one of those countries that abuses and uses quite a lot of alcohol, more than many other countries. And we need to be looking at precisely how we should do this. Could we have banned alcohol forever? And many people will say, no, you could not have. When would the right time have been to open it up? Was level 3 the correct time, or was it level 1? And that is a matter that is still open up for debate. On the tobacco issue, that is a matter that was discussed extensively, and many of our people, through various formations, participated in the debate, and that is what led to the change of decision, which we had announced. And it was after the participation and the views that we got from our people. And of course, now it is in the hands of the court. And the air travel issue, yes, we've allowed travel within the country for business purposes. And we believe that if, for instance, there can be, the protocols can be observed, we can curb the rate of infections. Because in the end, we do need to accept that this virus is going to be with us for a long time, and we need to take protective measures to ensure that we do not spread the virus. So everything has to be based on how we can adjust the risk and analyze the risk and arrive at a risk-adjusted outcome to move forward, because we cannot, in the end, remain locked up forever and in a day. I thank you.
Thank you, Mr. President. Honorable Mente.
Yes, thank you. Mr. President, with all the scientific evidence that the NCCC has got, you still have not released the statistics on the basis of race of all those that are affected, in fact, infected by the disease, and those that have passed on. We still want that. If then that's the scientific proof to indicate to all South Africans as to who is affected the most by this virus. Secondly, we need detail on specific actions that you have taken to ensure that our health system is not overwhelmed when the coronavirus reaches its peak. We need details on hospitals. We need details on healthcare workers. Will there be enough of them? We need details of the testing kits that the country has got now and the ventilators. And we want to know, because right now the country has got only 3,300 beds, both in public and private hospitals.
Honorable Member, your time has expired.
And that's not enough to accommodate.
Your time has expired. Honorable Member, please. Your time has expired. Honorable President. Honorable members in the front benches in the ANC here. You are out of order. You can't be screaming across the way you are doing right now. Please. You two in the left. No, you two. You've been doing it together. It's out of order, members. No, you can't be this disorderly, man. Please. Order. Honorable President.
Thank you, Honorable Deputy Speaker. Honorable Member would like us to give statistics on a race basis. The statistics are available as they've been accumulated on age and region and all that. And I guess they've not been classified on a racial basis. And they're also available on a gender basis. And I think that should already have been made public, as I think it has. So the classification on a race basis, in my view, has not been done. But I've heard what the Honorable Member is saying. With regards to the details on, say, hospitals, in relation particularly to our health system being overwhelmed, we've said that the period of the lockdown from level 5 to level 3 has given us the opportunity in our health system to be ready to do a whole number of things and to embark on a number of interventions. We have, for instance, the capacity that we now have is 404 quarantine facilities with 37,000 beds. And a number of them have already been activated. Almost 15,000 of these beds have been activated. And we're waiting for the activation of the others. 27,464 hospital beds allocated for COVID-19 patients, and of whom we've got 2,500 critical care beds. Now, of course, we need more. I have been at pains as I've traveled around the country telling our provinces that we need more of these beds. And we're utilizing the period that we are in now to get more of these beds. The health workers, we've got to have more health workers, and a number of health workers are also testing positive. We've got 1,076 nurses and 163 doctors who have tested positive, but we are going ahead recruiting other health workers who will come in. All our provinces need more health personnel. And I've said that within the allocated resources, we need to be getting more and more ready. And I've said that we can never be more ready for COVID-19. We've almost got to be over-prepared because the peak is still coming. And as we reach our peak, this period of the lockdown must have prepared us for it so that we are able to deal with the cases. And unfortunately, because our health system is at the level where it is, we've been seeing more recoveries, almost 55% recoveries. And all this is due to the health system. It is not yet where we want it to be, but at the same time, it is a health system that has been ensuring that those who recover do recover well. And 55% recoveries is quite a good number, but we would like to see it going higher and higher. I thank you.
Thank you, Mr. President. Honorable Dlomo, the chair of the committee, it's your turn. That's the question.
Thank you very much, Deputy Speaker.
No. You have asked the question. You wait for the president to answer. Huh? Is it a supplementary question? Oh, yeah. Oh, I'm not against abantu basembunga. Ngicela ukukhuluma mfowethu.
Okay. Thank you, Deputy Speaker. I'm asking a supplementary question to the President. In your address to the nation yesterday, Honorable President, you made reference to a term called doubling time, and you explained that term so well last night. There's another term, Honorable President, that scientists have also used, and you have made a reference on it now, the term called inflection point. Inflection point, just for the South Africans, is a point at which the epidemic changes from growing slowly to a point where it is growing exponentially. Can the President provide an indication on what may have happened in South Africa if the President did not act before the inflection point? Perhaps looking at what happened to countries that acted long after the inflection point. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Mr. President.
Thank you, Deputy Speaker. It is good to get an accolade from a medical doctor on medical terms. Honorable Deputy Speaker, if we had not implemented the lockdown when we did, we could quite easily have been speaking about thousands of South Africans having died. And our infection rate would have been much higher than what it is. we have been commended for having moved early, and it was not an easy decision, not only for the leaders in government, the cabinet, but also for our people collectively, because the reality of what we needed to do came suddenly. And in a way, it was when Dr. Mkhize came forward and said, from a medical point of view, Mr. President, this is what we are seeing. This virus is soon going to get out of our control unless we act. And we paused for a while, but in the end, as we saw the infection, right at the beginning, Dr. Mkhize called me twice a day to say, we now have so many, we now have so many. And even as he did, my heart started racing more and more, realizing the weighty situation that we were under. And it was then that the cabinet decided that we needed to act quickly. It was a collective decision. And as it turned out, it was a correct decision, because had we not done so, and we've done a demonstration, Dr. Zomo, Honorable Zomo, with the graph that I referred to earlier with the UK, not putting the UK down or any country down, but those countries that did not act as quickly as they should have found that the infection rate was galloping out of control. And we were rather fortunate. The World Health Organization, the United Nations, the Africa Center for Disease Control has complimented South Africa for the measures that we took when we did, because the action we took demonstrably flattened the curve. It demonstrably did flatten that curve, and it gave us an opportunity to get ready as we are continuing to get ready, but also to spread the message, to get South Africans to change their behavior, to get South Africans to behave in a way that demonstrates that, yes, we are going to live with this virus. We therefore have to change the way that we live. I thank you, Honorable Deputy Speaker.
Thank you, Doctor. Thank you, Mr. President. Honorable Thandi Modise, Madam Speaker, are you ready?
Yes, sir, I'm ready.
Thank you very much. Honorable, the Speaker will take over from me from now onwards. Thank you, Madam Speaker.
Thank you, sir. Mr. President, the question number 3 was put to you by the Honorable J.S. Malema. Mr. President.
Honorable Speaker and honorable members, as I indicated in the earlier reply, our response to the coronavirus pandemic has been informed by the advice of our scientists, made up of the Medical Advisory Committee, 51 scientists of various diverse disciplines. There's also been underpinned by the experiences of other countries and the guidance that we've received from bodies like the World Health Organization and the Africa Center for Disease Control and Prevention. And much of the scientific input we've received has come from, as I was saying, the Ministerial Advisory Committee, which was established by the Minister. through the course of the pandemic, the MAC, which is the Ministerial Advisory Committee, which, as I was saying, brings together disciplines such as scientists, clinicians, researchers, epidemiologists, has assisted government in various areas of the response. Now, the committee helped to develop the country's 8-phase strategy, in which a strict lockdown was just one of the phases, with specific objectives and a finite time frame. In deciding on when to begin the gradual and systematic easing of the lockdown, government was guided by the views of the scientists, the experience of other countries, and wide-ranging consultations. It also took into account the economic and social disruption that has been caused by the lockdown and the devastating impact the lockdown was having on people's incomes and livelihoods. In providing guidance, the Ministerial Committee used the level of community transmission as the basis for determining the state of the pandemic in the country. At that time, the proportion of coronavirus tests that were positive had been consistently low for a long time and had remained in a narrow range of 1.5% to 3.5% for several weeks in all parts of the country, except for in the Western Cape. In arriving at this decision, due consideration was given to the criteria suggested by the World Health Organization for countries to transition from lockdown to reopening of normal social activities. These criteria are, firstly, the disease transition should be under control. Secondly, health systems should be able to detect, test, isolate, and treat every case and trace every contact. Thirdly, hotspot risks should be minimized in vulnerable places. Fourthly, that schools, workplaces, and other essential places should have established preventative measures. And fifthly, that the risk of importing new cases can be managed. And lastly, that communities are fully educated, engaged, empowered to live under a new normal, that is, to live with the virus. In an advisory to the minister, the Ministerial Advisory Committee noted that some of the WHO criteria may not be appropriate for South Africa. Unlike several other countries, South Africa deliberately implemented a lockdown early in the progression of the disease as a strategy to delay transmission. I may add here that we were not the only country to immediately implement a lockdown. There were a number of countries that moved at the same time as we did. There were also countries that did not. And we did this knowing that we would not be able to bring transmission under control by the time we had to ease the lockdown. But that it would give us the time, as I've been saying, that we needed to strengthen our health system and put a comprehensive public health response in place. Now, the WHO has supported South Africa in this approach. In considering the transition from alert level 5 to alert level 4 and then subsequently to alert level 3, I engaged with numerous stakeholders, including business, labor, community representatives, political party leaders, premiers, mayors, traditional leaders, and religious leaders as well. And this we did so that the government can have the views of these myriad of stakeholders before transitioning to the next level. Now, as the National Coronavirus Command Council, we remain committed to consult widely with diverse stakeholders in taking decisions that will both protect the lives of our people and support their livelihoods. And it is on this basis that we have been able to take the decisions, including delineating certain areas of our country for differentiated type of approaches. And the differentiated approach, which is already showing good signs of benefit. So all what we have done was not thumb-sucked. It was properly discussed, properly assessed, and it was also benchmarked against what advice we got from the WHO, who are managing this virus across the world in the most magnificent way, because they know what is happening in every country, and they intervene with advice, with guidance, and precisely what we've been benefiting from. And we've also been bolstered by our own structure in Africa, which has really wrapped its arms around what the continent is doing in terms of a strategy, as well as the management of the virus continent-wide. So there have been a lot of advice, a lot of views that have been expressed in this regard, and that is what has strengthened us and given us the ability to manage the virus as we have. I thank you.
Thank you, Mr. President. The first supplementary goes to you, Honorable Malema.
Thank you very much, Speaker, and thank you for coming at a very critical time, because the other one would have messed up my session.
That's not necessary, Honorable Malema. Please proceed with the supplementary.
Saying it's supposed to be necessary to you, Speaker. It's my turn now. So yes. Now, what happens, Mr. President, is that we are more than convinced that we are actually not following any scientific advice. If anything, we're being bullied by big capital, which maximize profit at all costs. Because what type of scientific advice will advise that the president of a country should address or answer questions in parliament sitting in his home next to a fireplace and allow children to go to school? Because the president who's got all types of resources can address parliament.
Honorable Sulu, mute your mic.
You are sitting comfortably in your own home as a leader of a country who follows science, and your science says take children to schools, to the streets, to go and fight this pandemic, while all of us are in the comfort of our own home. Mr. President, do you have any scientific evidence of how many people are going to die out of this pandemic? Have you been given an advice as to within a particular period of time we can expect that South Africa will lose so many lives, or we are just going as usual without even anticipating or knowing what are the expected infections and what are the expected death within a particular period of time? Because we know, Mr. President, that you are chasing only profits and not lives. You've got a history of sacrificing life in Marikana for profit. And we are experiencing it again now where the lives of children are being
Honorable Malema.
When you should give us solutions and stop talking what you talk. Give us solutions.
Shut up,
where the libraries on COVID. He must stop insulting the president.
Honorable Malema, hold on.
He must stop it.
Malema is also at home on the fireplace. Malema is also not in parliament.
Honorable members, if you have not been recognized to speak, do not unmute that mic, because otherwise I will give instructions for that mic to be muted. You will respect us because we are on parliamentary business. Honorable Malema, you are wrapping up your supplementary.
So, I mean, there is no any science that can say to you, Mr. President, sell alcohol, it is safe to sell alcohol. Because you will know, science will advise you that once you sell alcohol, the trauma units are going to be
Honorable Malema, your time is now expired.
And we'll have to divide the resources.
Honorable Malema, your time is up. Mr. President.
Thank you, Honorable Speaker and honorable members. We have said repeatedly, and I said that in my main reply, that we have been advised by top scientists in our country, and we've also benchmarked what we are doing here against what is happening in other parts of the world. Many parts of the world did not do what we did. Our lockdown was hard. We will concede that. We went on even to restrict things that many other countries did not restrict, like alcohol, like cigarettes, and the buying and selling of a number of items. But we knew that with time, we were not going to be able to keep to the lockdown forever, because it is impossible to lock any country down forever. And let me say, many other countries around the world are having to deal with the challenges that we are dealing with. Some eased their lockdowns and reverted back to harder lockdowns. Some did not lock down what we did, and they have paid the price for it. And we've been well advised to do what we are doing on a gradual basis with the necessary advice. The opening up of schools, we've explained how this has evolved. Many countries have opened schools and others have not. And as we observed the opening of schools around the world and the protocols they were putting in place and the advice that we got, we realized that, yes, we could do exactly the same, but with even harder a protocol. And that's what we opted for. The issue of alcohol, I have explained it. The issue of tobacco, I have explained it. And all this has been well discussed. And let me even say that the discussions even ensued at the NEDLAC level, where labor, communities, and business are represented. Where as we moved from level 5, the consultations were quite broad, very broad and detailed, and backed up by the scientific and the medical advice. We were able to package all that and say we can move forward on a risk-adjusted basis, adjusting the risk. And of course, it is a risk. Like everything else would be a risk. But what I would like to reiterate is we've been resolutely committed to saving lives. When we took the decision for a lockdown, the overriding objective was to save the lives of South Africans. And that continues to guide what we do. It guides our actions. But at the same time, we've also said we need to preserve livelihoods. Now, when we introduced or announced the 500 billion assistance package, we knew that for the most part it was going to be a stopgap measure. It was going to help to stabilize the lives of our people. It could not go on forever. And that is why even with the social grants, they were time-based. They were not additions to social grants, including the COVID-19 350 Rand. It's not forever because we don't have the resources. But we knew that we needed to act and to come in and support the livelihoods of our people. Now, there is no